Thank you very much. To be very, very concrete, because the EU summit EU, Latin America and Caribbean will take place in January. Raül talked about the possible action plan, which goes beyond of what heads of state have done until now, which is just declare inside the final declaration that they are worried about the phenomenon. In what context would you embed this action plan? What are the necessary cornerstones so that it is more than the current declarations that have not helped to curb the phenomenon, but to make it a bit more visible, but this was not enough? What would you add as an added value?
I mean, it's not a new notion that globally we all want to focus on gender, but what we're missing is a specificity. And if we don't recognize that violence against women is a cause and a consequence of inequality and discrimination, then we're doing a disservice. So we need to render it, as Raül has said, we need to make it visible that it's not about charity, it's not a social issue, it's not a cultural issue. So in any plan or policy, if there's no recognition, if we talk about gender mainstreaming without recognizing that violence against women is a cause and a consequence of inequality and discrimination, then we're not even going to get off the starting blocks. So for me, that's fundamental. There needs to be mainstreaming, there needs to be a gender focus, but there needs to be specificity in terms of what is it that violates and diminishes women's rights to equality and non-discrimination, and violence does that globally. And so that needs to be clear-cut. It wasn't clear-cut in the MDGs. I'm hoping that the post-2015 agenda picks up on the fact that when we don't articulate with specificity that violence against women is a cause and a consequence of inequality and discrimination, then we're failing women. Because just talking about mainstreaming gender means that we're talking the rhetoric that we all know, but we're not dealing with the specificities of the inability to attain substantive equality and non-discrimination.
Mrs. Parvanova, what sort of monitoring could EU legislators do in this context presented here?
I think first of all for European legislators, and not only legislators, all political, the highest political level in our EU institutions, needs a little bit to reconsider the priorities that we put in these international talks, summits, and in our work as well. Because if you look at the facts, for about 2 years, the Parliament is demanding from the Commission to come up either with legislation combating violence against women or to come up with a strategy for 2 years. And if we are not able to reconsider our own priorities, if we do not put in order our own house and our own thoughts, how we are going to communicate with others that it is a priority in our international policy, in the funds that we dedicate for international development and regional development, in our total communication with international politicians, how are we going to put as a priority, as part of the human rights, also the women's rights, and especially protecting women from historically anchored already practices violence to the severest extent, which is killing of women. So in this regard, probably we have to monitor our standards and our priorities, and then based on the evidence about the trends of violence, and especially taking into account the crisis, what were the trends of violence in the member states and in the world, in our partnering countries, and what they are during the crisis, probably then in an evidence-based way we will face the truth. Is it deteriorating? Is it getting better or worse? In which countries is it getting better or worse? For what reasons? And is it only the legislation and the political commitment or something else? How the development of the society actually is shaped around the reconsidering of priorities during crisis. What is it true that we started the austerity measures with the social package, with the healthcare package? Did we reach also the extent when we are breaching or we are interfering with the human rights package? And who is the first in the human rights package? Is it true? Do we have an evidence that we started with the women's rights in this package? Do our austerity measures actually influence the women's rights? This is something that in the monitoring process should, in evidence-based way, should be presented to the decision makers, and probably by having this data and being able to analyze, we will be able to put our policies and priorities in the right order.